Hello everybody, and welcome those of you who are new and a few people who are return visitors. They didn't give up on us, they came back. So thanks for being here, and thank you so much to my three friends, Robin Tarblett and Ken Manning and Sandy Crott, who are going to be joining us today. This is I think it's our 9th episode of the Thriving in the Eye of the Hurricane podcast. We're going to be shifting gears a little bit. This is our last talk of people who are in the book. And we're going to be going forward next year, and starting in January, we'll just be meeting the third week of every month. So we'll be shifting the schedule a bit. Instead of every third week, we'll just be doing the third week. And these podcasts will be a little different going forward in that I'll be asking people who've read the book and have been impacted by the book and want to interact and share on the podcast. So that's going to be really, really wonderful. Oh, there's Lynn McGright and Mary Britt. So we're very fortunate today to have the principals of Insight Principles Consulting. Sandy and Ken and Robin wrote a book called Insight. Is it Insight Power?
Invisible Power.
Invisible Power. Invisible Power. I should have that seared in my memory. And it's a wonderful book for people who are in working in organizations and business. There's lots of extraordinary stories in there about how this understanding of the three principles and the nature of resilience, as people gain an understanding of that working in the workplace, how that clarifies their thinking, which leads to better decision making, more creative response to uncertain situations, better teamwork, just a overall lifting of the spirits of an organization, which allows us to function in a much better way. And in today's world, as you all know very clearly, we're living in a world where business has just been turned upside down. Robin and Sandy and Ken were commenting when I asked them, have you been traveling lately? Are you back traveling? They say, what's that? So like in the last year, most of us have not traveled on an airplane or done our business the way we would normally do, going to conventions, attending meetings, flying in to visit our customers. Most of it's being done on Zoom. So that's just one of the adaptations, which from my perspective, I think is a wonderful thing. Don't have to have jet lag and get on airplanes and get to go all over the world. But this really been a challenge for a lot of people. Just yesterday, I was talking to Hennepin County Medical Center, which is the largest healthcare organization in the Twin Cities where I live. And the burnout rate there since the pandemic began, went from 12.5% to 70% with their employees. So healthcare is a particularly stressful workplace because of what's going on with COVID. But it's happened that uncertainty of the future, people not being able to see each other in person, all of these things have impacted productivity, just not knowing how to make changes. A lot of businesses going bankrupt. A lot of people quitting their jobs, realizing I really like being with my family. I don't think I want to go to work anymore. So it's really shaken things up. So the more that we have this invisible power of understanding where the source of our experience is, and that we have this innate capacity, this innate propensity to be resilient, to think on our feet, to bounce back, to adapt to change and think creatively. I can't think of a better team of people to talk about how this can impact their workplace. So Sandy has volunteered to kick us off here. The chapter in the book is on working smarter, not harder, applications to the workplace of the resilience paradigm. So maybe Sandy, you can kick this off.
Thanks, Joe. Hi, everybody. I was reflecting about this podcast earlier today, and one of the things that I wanted to point out, I think your book is coming out. It's just such a perfect time, not only because of the times we're going through with the pandemic, but also I think because, at least from my perspective, there's been a real change in what my clients in the business world are interested in. I've been teaching the three principles for 40 plus years, and 20 years working exclusively in business. And I would say, Ken and Robin can either agree or disagree with this. My observation is that when I first started working with business people 20 years ago, most of my clients were more interested in what I would call productivity. They wanted to know how to get more work done. They wanted to know how to be more efficient. They wanted to know how to have more influence. They wanted to know how to get ahead. That was mostly the topics of our conversation. And of course, as you pointed out, Joe, when you understand how your mind works, when you understand the inside out nature of our experience, that it's all happening from within via thought, you find yourself in a much more settled place. And so you're able to be more productive. You're able to make better decisions. You're able to have better communication. So that was absolutely learning the principles for that for people was exactly what the doctor ordered. But I would say lately, I don't know, maybe in the last couple of years, the clients that I'm working with seem to be looking in a different direction. And they seem to be more interested in their own inner well-being. They're looking more inwardly and wanting to find a more meaningful, have a kind of a more meaningful life. And I was reminded, I don't know, recently I read this quote. It's a Rumi quote, and it goes something, I'm going to murder it, something like, yesterday I was clever and I tried to change the world, and today I'm wise and I'm only working on myself. And that's kind of how I'm seeing people. They're more in tune or just interested in having their own lives be more in balance and rich. And they know it's going to impact their work, but that's not their focus. I was just talking to someone this morning, and she said, this lovely talk to her, she said, Sandy, before I took your program, I don't think I knew what well-being was. I mean, I know what well-being was, but I thought it was that it came from accomplishment. She said, I realized through taking your program that it's who I am. It's a natural feeling. And she said, what I also realized is that I was giving that away for the most ridiculous reasons.
The well-being.
I was giving my well-being away for the most ridiculous reasons. And I didn't realize it. I thought my well-being was attached to what was going on out there in the world, what was going on with my team, what was going on with my boss, what was happening in the economy. But that's not the case. It's something happening in me, and I'm waking up to the fact that I'm giving it away, and I don't want to do that. So more and more, I find that people are looking for deeper feelings. They're looking for happiness. They're looking to be resilient. and the principals are coming into their life at kind of at perfect timing.
So, Sandy, would you say that, just to follow up on that point, would you say that before they even learn the principles from you, there's a shift that's happening in the collective, that people are kind of looking for something different than just driving harder and faster and succeeding, to well-being, and happiness and purpose and meaning and that type of thing?
That's what I would say. There's a shift. Subtle. It's a subtle shift, and it's certainly not everybody.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's my observation.
Yeah. I think I've seen that in a lot of different areas, not just in business, but in healthcare and just social services, that it seems like in a way the pandemic has led people to be more reflective on what's really important, what really matters. It's kind of a wake-up call for all of us. So
yeah, it could be. And of course,
yeah.
There's no getting around the fact that once that happens, once you really do start to see what well-being is and where it comes from, your work is going to improve, all aspects of it. As I said, including your productivity, but also your relationships, your ability to set strategy and to communicate that strategy to others. So it's across the board.
Could you give us a specific example, Sandy, of someone you've worked with that would demonstrate that? If anyone comes to mind?
Amy?
Well, I was just talking to, again, one of the guys who took a program from us last year. And he's made huge changes in his life. I mean, he just went from being a self-described stress case to really somebody who can stay stable even in the face of a lot of turmoil. And the company that he's working with decided to merge two business units, which is a big deal in a company. It just upsets a lot of people day to day, and it often means much more work for people. And he's handling it really well. You know, his boss is also somebody who took our program, and he's also somebody who can handle all that upheaval well. But the boss's boss, who is the VP of the company, is somebody who doesn't always think things through. And he decides, in the middle of all this craziness going on with merging two business units, to throw in a whole new procedure. They're in finance, whole new procedure that is going to require his people to do more work. And my client, I'm going to call him Mike. Mike he's on the Zoom call when the VP tells them they all have to do this extra piece of work now. And he says, you could see everybody's face just drop. And everybody goes into a reaction. But the VP says, now look, I know this is extra work, so you can hire some contract workers to help you. But they all know that that's not so easy, because you get a contract person, but you got to train them, and there's a training period, and it wasn't really going to help them that much. So they're all grumbling and sending little iMessages and to each other, and he says, I had my reaction. That I really reacted. But I got off the Zoom call and I realized I was in a reaction. And I thought, I gotta settle down here. So he says, so I just sat back in my chair and I just looked out the window. And he said, it popped into my mind, I know somebody who's a recruiter. He's a buddy of mine. He's a recruiter. I'm going to call him, see if they've got a contract person who meets our specifications. So he calls his buddy, and his buddy says, oh, are you kidding me? Everybody wants what you're looking for. no, we don't have any, no, nobody who is temporary. He said, I can give you a full-time person, but I can't give you anybody temporary. Sorry. So my client goes, oh, well, that's too bad, but he's still settled. The next morning, his buddy, the recruiter, calls him, says, you're not going to believe this. A resume just came across my desk. He's the perfect candidate. He only wants a temp job. He's getting his master's degree. And the guy, he hired him right away. He fit in perfectly. Didn't really have much training. It all worked out great. Now my client's coworkers are all still pulling their hair out, trying to figure out how they're going to get this all done. So, I mean, it sounds like a small thing, but it's the difference between a workload that is very difficult but manageable, and this extra thing would have just thrown it into an unmanageable category. And he waited for an insight, has an insight, and solved the problem for himself.
That's great. Thank you so much, Sandy, for that example. I think it helps people to really get the taste of this.
To really recognize where your feelings are coming from. You know, it's so valuable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, as the timekeeper here, I'm going to move this along to whoever wants to go next, Kenny or Robin.
Go ahead, Robin.
You were voting for me, Ken?
Yeah, or I'm happy to go if you like, whatever.
Well, how are you guys, decisive or indecisive?
We used to be. Now we're not so sure anymore.
We used to have long meetings to make these decisions.
Uh-huh.
Well, I got something that follows on from what Sandy said. And just to touch on the first thing, I think the reason there's been this shift in awareness is because everybody caught up in COVID was caught up with something they did not control. So it didn't matter how smart or, everybody pretty much had similar circumstances. And a few people have told me they had this really interesting realization. Well, why is he doing so much better than me? And why is she doing so much worse than me? Everybody's in the same situation, but we're all doing differently. And it made people realize that maybe something going on inside was the factor. So what I've noticed is that COVID has made people realize there's another variable at play other than circumstances, because we pretty much all got similar circumstances. So I think we're at a really lucky point that we have now a whole bunch of people who are much more interested than they used to be, because I have to tell you, the joy and the challenge of working with the business world is most people are not interested. If you ask someone about their stress, they'll say, well, I have 1,000 people working for me, so, it's normal that I'm stressed. And the day I retire, I won't have stress. So it's a very rich, target-rich field. And it's a field that until recently was a bit oblivious to what was going on. But this brings a challenge because most people in the business world are not really interested in looking inside, not at least until more recently. So our job and our endeavor and the game that we've all been engaged in, Sandy, Ken, and I, is how do we get people to be interested? How do we get people to see the relevance of learning about the mind? And our basic approach has been to do the same thing that you would do with an animal that you wanted to take a pill. And if you want to give a dog a pill, either you have a dog who just happens to eat pills. Most people don't have dogs like that. So you typically wrap the pill in something the dog really wants to eat. So we've sort of had that as our endeavor. We'll go into a company. We won't talk about the mind. We won't talk about, the three principles. We'll find out what are they trying to get done. And then at some point we'll hear, oh, if they knew this about their mind, if they knew this about how the system works, they'd be fine. But we don't talk about that. We just talk about the thing they want to get. So they get really juiced and interested. And then we find a way to explain it to them in a way that makes sense to them. And so we do a lot of tailoring. And then we always have this conversation at the end of our program where the person says, this wasn't about the business result. This wasn't about getting sales up. This was about my humanity. And we go, yeah, exactly. And they say, well, why didn't you tell me? And we say, you wouldn't have been interested. Now, what's been happening, and I agree with Sandy wholeheartedly, is that's been shifting. We get more and more people who come and they want the pill. They don't want the meat. They want the pill. Mm-hmm. And it's been a real joy to help them look inside. We still try and make it relevant so that they can explain to the other people in their company how this is something useful. And what people find is that if you orient them towards this innate wisdom, this innate resilience, this innate capability that's built into all people, they get to have better lives no matter what. And if they're having better lives, they get better business results. So it's like it's a 2-for-1. So the big joy for me in the years I've been doing this has been to come across people who are not interested at all, find a way to have them look in a different direction, and then sit there as they uncover something precious that then changes their life. And then the only thing that the three of us have to do is when we get thanked, we have to keep pointing, no, don't thank us. We were just the tour guides. You don't thank the tour guide for Paris. The tour guide didn't make Paris. He just showed you around. But we find that people get so deeply touched that they then talk to other people about it. And Ken, probably since 2009, we just haven't done any marketing. You're muted, Ken.
We didn't do it then, any then either.
So we just have people who wake up to what's going on inside, something they've always had that they either haven't recognized or have ignored. And we just alert them to where to look. And when they look, they find it. And we've had fabulous stories of people years afterwards telling us remarkable things that have happened in their lives, either personally or professionally or both. And we have the honor and the privilege of being tour guides. So this has been the best thing I've ever had the blessing of doing in my life. And I only wish I'd come across it when I was a teenager.
Or earlier. Yeah.
But it's been, it's just fabulous because business people are people. They're not different. And most of them have a level of psychological suffering that you might not classify as mental illness, but it's not far off. And they all just think it's normal and expected, and they have to live with it. And as Sandy said, we help them see that they don't. And if they're not, everything else works better too. So it's a great privilege to be able to share this with people. And despite the difficulty of my colleagues, it's a great privilege to work with them too.
That was a succinct and beautiful explanation of how this works in business. Thank you so much, Robin. That was very, and the stories that all three of you told about that company in Italy, I don't know if people can read the book. You probably have 100 other stories even better or as good as that one, but that it just, I would imagine part of the reason you don't have to market is that people find something that really works, that really helps them. They tell all their friends who are other CEOs or other people in business, and pretty soon I want what you're having. How come you're not stressed and you used to be? What's up with that? So it's a contagious virus. I call the resilience, the principles, the vaccination for mental health, because it really inoculates people against the stressors, so-called, of life when you have that immunity, that psychological immunity. So thank you, Robin. So Kenny.
So I promised you, Joe, I'd say ditto, ditto. So that's it.
Okay.
Well, something comes to mind, which is, I mean, I have so many pieces to share, but I'll just share one. And the thing that comes to mind about business is really power. When I did psychotherapy for 20 years before I got into teaching in business. And getting into business, I started to see that there are all these power dynamics that are very complicated for people at an unconscious level in business. And we come into a lot of corporate systems that have a big hierarchy and teams that have leaders that are either healthy or not healthy, with team members and peers that are either healthy or not healthy. And everybody in those systems are unwittingly carrying lots of thoughts about their colleagues and about who has power and who doesn't have power, and do I have power with this person? So we get into these team dynamics, and people are they're not being themselves because they're trying to position themselves in their roles to the other roles that have more power or whatever. So it's really delightful for me to see that as we share the principles with people and their heads clear, they come out from underneath these roles. They come out from underneath these perceived power inequities that are in the room or in the company or in the environment. And they start thinking for themselves, and they start getting really creative for themselves, and they start having all this insight, and they see what they can do, what the company can do, what the team can do. And it's just a really beautiful thing to see. And they didn't realize that it was their thinking that was keeping them from being themselves. And they thought it was all these power dynamics that was keeping them from being themselves. So it's really delightful to see people have the light turn on in their spirit. It's just a really beautiful thing. And then they bring it to the rest of the company, and the lights turn on all around them. So it's really fun to see as we get referred from one team to another, that the next team within that company is actually a lot easier to work with because the lights are on a little bit more. And as we work with organizations, go down in levels within the organization, the lights have already started to turn on. It's like the principles are in the air, the feeling is in the air, the spirit is in the air. And the power dynamics have softened. And the desire to really hear what everybody's thinking and what everybody has to offer is coming up. So it's really beautiful to see that in companies.
Kenny, just to comment on that, when Keith Blevins, who's on this call, worked with Mayo Clinic with their leadership team, with the department chairs and et cetera, even though we only worked with maybe 150 leaders over a 4-year period, the level of burnout, because Mayo Clinic is really good about measuring all the metrics about burnout and all of these scales and everything, went down 12% for the 6,000 employees, even though there were only like 100 and some that went through the program, because they were in a position where their state of mind, how they showed up, impacted their employees. They became more cooperative, less confrontational, more cooperative instead of competitive. So it was a cultural shift that happened. And I imagine you guys see that. I don't know if anyone wants to comment on that, or if we should open it up to the larger group, but
let's see what's on people's minds.
Okay. I'm going to put the gallery view up for myself so I can see everyone. So if you want to make a comment or a question, down at the bottom there where it has reactions on the bottom of your screen, there's a thing that says raise hand. Just click on that and you can raise your hand and we'll call on you. Comment, question. I can't stand this podcast anymore.
Alistair has his
Can't
hand
wait
up.
for the next one.
Alistair has his hand up.
Oh, okay. Alistair.
Hi guys, how are we? I just wanted to say my introduction to the three principles is by the book Invisible Power. Now, 6 months ago, I had a conversation with Kenny that's on the call actually. So we've been in touch every week since that. And because of the pandemic, our grounding is from the restaurant business. So we're from Sweden, and it's been turmoil. There's a lot of restaurants been closing, a lot of teams been laid off, and then we started coming through the pandemics, and we saw that the restaurant owners, managers were not in the right frame of mind to be able to cope with an increase in sales or re-employing. They're still worrying the financials behind it. And that's when Kenny said, hey, I have a book that you need to read. And so 2 days later, it came from Amazon, and that was my introduction. And so I want to really thank you guys for that. But I completely agree. I think if Kenny had shown me a book, from directly from Sid, then I wouldn't really have taken it in directly. And because this was placed from the business side, I had more of an understanding towards, I think there was one story where the guy, said, I'm stressed out. And I think you guys said, but, what are you stressed about? You're still going to get your emails. You're still going to get the deadlines. This is all going to be there. It's you that puts the feeling stressed onto the duties involved. And that really sat close to me because I was that kind of person, having different departments coming in for, deadlines. And I put the thought on it that I'm stressed. I'm not going to be able to do this. And when I saw that, then it was easy. The deadline was there. It had to be an 8 o'clock the next morning. It doesn't matter. So I really thank you. It's transformed a lot within myself towards business and how I see things. So thank you.
Well, Alistair and Kenny, we have it in Swedish. You're most welcome.
Who else has their? Oh, Nikon. Hi, Nikon.
It's just an open question to all three of you. Big fan, by the way, like huge fan. Been using your book as kind of my business 3P Bible and working with companies in Thailand, and it's been so much fun. So my question to you is, I'd be curious to listen to how does business look to you now compared to when you first started doing this work? Like what changed in your seeing about business through your work?
Can you ask a more specific question?
Okay. Okay. I guess my question is, like, what have been some of the highlights in your work over the years? Like, what have been the big insights that dropped for you that that you felt changed the game for you in your own work?
Well, can I?
Yeah.
When and by the way, I'll answer your vague question that Ken didn't like also.
This is a great show, Joe.
When I got into this some 20 years ago, it looked to me like a productivity thing, which, like Sandy said, if you can help people settle down, they'll do better. And then I quickly uncovered, no, people are suffering. And so it then switched and became, how do I help people see that they're fine? And then everything else takes care of itself. So it's not like the productivity is off the table. It's going to happen anyway. And then the other thing I saw was that where there's a problem, love is missing. Except in business, we don't sit around a meeting saying, hey, how's the love quotient doing today? Do you love me? I love you. Well, I don't love you so much. I mean, you don't talk about it. And we did a lovely, lovely program where this was a group of people who were between a rock and a hard place. I mean, they had a tremendous problem to solve. And the CEO had convened the meeting, literally the Thursday, Friday, and Saturday before Christmas, because that was the only time they could get it done. People had to fly in all over the world, which meant people were going to fly out on the Sunday to get back for Christmas. And there was a snowstorm, which means all the planes got canceled. So, it was not an optimum setup. And while we were helping them understand where to look, we got this palpable sense of love in the room. Except it was like a bunch of people who didn't really know how to say it to each other. They're like, they could punch each other in the arm rather than say, I love you. And so Ken stepped up and he spoke about love for 45 minutes. And the whole room dropped. They all got quiet. They then got onto the business topic. And the leader, who hadn't quite seen this, he said, well, we should end the meeting. The weather's bad. It's Saturday. And everybody says, no, we're not stopping. We need to do this. And they stayed on, even though the weather was bad, and produced a phenomenal result. And so it's the insight for me, not just in business, but also in myself, is where love is not visible or felt or present, there's just misunderstanding.
Wow. That is super powerful.
That's profound. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
So I sit there looking, if I don't have love for you, well, then something's off in my system. If there isn't love in the room, well, what have people not seen, or what have people got caught up in? That's an illusion that it would be good if you could clarify for them. Because when people get quiet and look inside and see the innate nature of being human, love shows up.
Thanks, Robin. I really appreciate that.
Oh, pleasure, Nikon.
Anne, you're next.
Thanks.
By the way, Anne has been CEO of a couple of corporations, so I imagine you can relate to this.
Yeah, it's remarkable, and it leads me to the current times and the discussion of the massive Zoom layoff by the Better.com CEO. And I'm sure that you're all aware of that. 900 employees, he thought it would be a good idea to lay them off on a Zoom call. And I've heard today that now he's on, let's call it sabbatical, for lack of whatever their term is. But my question to you is, in these new days of Zoom and culture, and you're speaking of love, if they were your client, what would you be saying?
Well, I was going to answer James' question also, but I'll answer it with you, Anne. What we see, my big insight is that we all think our intellect is smarter than God. And that's a problem. And when we teach the principles, we help people realize that there's a greater intelligence available inside of them and in everybody else, greater than their own intellect. And that's the game, is really to get people to see that. And once people start to realize that, the love comes out, or the humanity comes out, or the compassion or the consideration for other people comes out. But it's such a deep, entrenched habit for us to be in our daily thinking that intellectual thinking is the point of life. We get stuck there, and I think that's, it's dangerous. Dangerous for ourselves, and it's dangerous for everybody around us. So that's the deeper point that I like to go for with people who would fire 900 people on Zoom. So am I answering your question, Anne?
Yes, you are. But I think it brings up the so many companies, people are working from home, and the culture is being impacted by the distance between coworkers and among staff. So how do you capture that successfully? How does culture survive with so many people wanting to be outside or away from the office, or prefer interacting on this platform versus in person?
Well, we managed to run our programs on Zoom, and they're equally as effective as if we were in person. And we've realized we do need to do a little bit of extra rapport building and personal connection up front over Zoom than we would have otherwise, and to enable us to have the impact that we have on Zoom. So I guess the point I'm trying to make is, if you're mindful of connection and humanity and listening and rapport and good relationships, you can do it over Zoom. I mean, families have to meet over Zoom for years at a time because they can't go see each other anymore. They still love each other, they still connect, they still have deep, rich intimacy. It's just not in the same room. Well, we can do that here, and anybody can do that in business. It's just that in business, the consciousness of good rapport and healthy relationships wasn't there to begin with. Then the Zoom made it doubly worse, because now they don't even have to pay attention to each other. They can do something else while someone else is talking. So you just have to break the barrier of intimacy or connection or rapport or understanding or empathy or whatever it is, more deliberately, since we're on the screen and we don't have all the body language and the smell and the sound and all that kind of stuff.
I think that's it, Ken. I think you hit on it. That, you either have this compassion and empathy built into the culture of your organization, or you just have these signs on the hall when you enter the building. And if that's the case, then the principles become tantamount to building that.
Yeah. And it takes a little bit of upfront effort to do that, but it's, once you break the ice, it flows nicely.
Thank you.
I found too that just doing talks and consulting on Zoom, that people have often commented, it almost feels like I'm in your living room. It feels more intimate than if I was at a conference or at a seminar, at a retreat or something. It's like there's almost a deeper connection with Zoom. So I think it's a mindset we can have about it. But that's just, again, it's thought. If you think Zoom is going to be a barrier, then it will be for you. And that's how powerful our thinking is. So,
people forget that I just want to add one thing. People
Sure.
forget that pre-pandemic, how did people communicate? Email. You'd be across the hall from somebody and you'd email them. So it's funny how people say, oh, it's all over now because we don't get to see each other. Well, you got to see each other before and you emailed them.
So true, Sandy. And I think email is even a flatter communication, way flatter than Zoom. You can, it depends on the reader's thoughts as to how your email is perceived.
Yeah. Tom Maddox.
Yeah, hi everybody. Thanks for doing this. I have a question. I think a lot of the practitioners on the call today have, worked with people individually, either as like a therapist or, that kind of relationship. And I kind of imagine that, in those sort of situations, often when someone comes in, you start talking, they have an issue or a problem, and then it just kind of works out how to share the principles with them. And I'm wondering, when you jumped or when you started doing groups, is there, I know the principles are the same, but is your approach to doing a workshop or a class, like what sort of things need to be considered? And part of the reason I ask this is I'm in the 3PG apprentice program, and I've seen, examples. In fact, Sandy, a couple of months ago, did a coaching session with someone. And I'm just kind of curious that I feel like I want to more go in the direction of working in groups rather than with individual people coming in with, whatever they're coming in with. So anything on that topic that any of you can speak to would really be helpful.
Well, I'll take a shot at it. One of the things that I had to learn in the hard way, frankly, is I thought, because I was so into the principle, understanding the principle made such a difference in my life. I figured, I just have to tell people. Well, no. As Robin pointed out, a lot of the people who come to a program that we do in business aren't volunteers versus somebody who shows up for coaching or therapy. So you really, Tom, you really have to ask yourself, what's going to be relevant to them?
Mm-hmm.
What do they want to know about? What keeps them awake at night? What are they struggling with? And connect the dots between that, whatever that issue or issues are, and what the principles mean for humanity.
Mm-hmm.
You have to help people see the relevance of what you're bringing to the table. And I mean, we do a lot of different things. We, as Robin said, we do a lot of prep work beforehand, so that people come into the program wanting to learn something. But once we get them there, we really do. We don't want to talk at them for hours at a time. We want to engage them. We do all kinds of experiments and exercises and trying to get them to look where we're pointing. So I don't know, is that helping you at all?
Yeah. Oh, that's very helpful. That's very helpful. Thank you.
Tom, when you said groups, did you mean groups in business or just any kind of groups?
Well, I think, actually, it could be just a community group, just somewhere out in the community where you're offering, maybe, I can see that a little easier when you're just maybe offering a workshop on well-being, maybe. But when I think of groups, I think more of like business or education, where they have staff, staff development types of things going on, or trainings, more in that world.
Yeah.
With groups.
Well, another difference is that in therapy, people present an issue and then you respond. In a group training, you don't have that. You have something you want to share with people, so you kind of have to think through what you want to tell people, not in response to what they're saying, but just from you. What do you want to share with them?
Right.
It's a different activity.
Right.
I think the common denominator, whether it's therapy or coaching or consulting with businesses, is really listening to your client deeply and understanding their world. And the more that you understand, it triggers your own wisdom and insights how to be responsive to that, rather than just you telling everybody the same. It's not like everybody's just going to be going in and preaching the principles. That's going to go, if it's not relevant, people aren't going to hear you. Nikon, you had your hand up.
Yeah,
Sorry, Tom, were you done, Tom? Yeah, okay.
So I was inspired by what Ken said about, we all think our intellect is smarter than God, and that's the problem. And I realized, I think that's one of the main problems that I see in my clients, like especially in corporate, they're usually complaining to me about their boss's ego or like power. And like, I think power dynamics in Asia, they're really big and they're really loud, but on the outside, it looks very quiet, but it's like a big deal. So I wonder, in your work, how do you navigate that? Or how do you help your clients navigate around big egos and like big power trips, I guess?
Aikido, judo, and occasionally karate.
Well, he's the Taekwondo master. So
Taekwondo is very effective.
So how, I guess, apart from getting a restraining order, what else you got? Like that would quickly lead to a restraining order.
Well, you know, no one ever has power over your inner life except you. So you first have to establish with people that that's a fact. And the principles are the perfect knowledge base to help a person quickly realize that. Until they realize that it's all going to be complaining.
Right, or strategies trying to, how do I deal with that? And until you realize that there's nothing to deal with, right?
Which is more of what I call complaining.
Yeah.
And, you know, once you realize that, once a person realizes that, they will begin to have a flow of insight about what they can do and what they can't do.
Mhm.
And we see it every week. I mean,
Yeah, and it's not like the principles, understanding that how your mind works turns you into some kind of a doormat. That is not what happens. Absolutely not. Sometimes people hear that at the beginning. Oh, you just want me to be quiet. Oh, you just want me to agree with everything. No,
Roll over, right?
that's not what we're saying. We're wanting you to be your best self. We want you to have all the tools that we were given by virtue of the principles being true. I mean, the principles make resilience possible. The principles make insight possible. The principles make change possible. Everything is possible because of the principles. And when people see that, it really changes the game.
Wow.
That was helpful.
I would add just one very small comment is when people learn about how their mind works, we point out that it's generic. And the same thing's going on with the person in front of you who appears to be giving you a hard time or who's caught up in their ego. And when you can start to see what's going on with people at the level of the basic mechanics of being human, it allows you to be in front of someone who's trying to push you around or be rude or, you know, use their power. It allows you to be neutral. Because, you know, if you had their thinking, guess what you'd be doing? And the minute that happens, it's what Sandy says, you start to get insights about how to deal with the thing that you have to deal with. But, you know, if you see that we're all basically innocent, you know, you'll notice that your boss giving you a hard time is having a bad hair day. And, you know, if you had his thinking, so would you. So compassion shows up, you know, intelligence shows up, wisdom shows up, and you'll do a much better job of sorting out the situation than if you're either complaining, as Ken said, or, you know, reacting.
That was helpful. Thank you.
Alistar is back with another question. Go for it, Alistar.
Yeah, so it was just the effects of what you do. Do you see more of effect by working with a higher management down or starting off with middle management up? If you understand the question, sorry.
Yeah, the higher up you can start in a company, the better. Because, you know, the boss casts a larger shadow than the guy at the reception. But very often, Alistair, you know, you can work with a group, it's a contained group, and as, you know, Joe said, you know, they start to get great results and people are like, oh, hey, what's going on over there? I want some of that. So you can start anywhere, but the higher up you can start, the more leverage potentially.
Thank you.
Any other comments that anyone else has before we close, or the three of you have anything to say in summary or last comments?
yeah, thanks, Joe, for having us join you. It's been great.
My pleasure, my delight. You guys are wonderful. It's so good.
Read Joe's book.
Thank you. Thank you. It's out in the UK and Europe now, so as of last week. So, but you guys, I really appreciate something about talking about how this goes into the world of corporations. Everybody thinks, oh, well, they're just cold, impersonal organizations. How could something like 3 principles transform an organization? But the work that you guys have done, and many others, by the way, you guys have trained a lot of other people who are doing the same work you're doing all over the world, and many other people who we probably don't even know about are utilizing the understanding of the principles to change organizations. So this is any time there's been an evolution in humankind, something has triggered it. And there was a starter, like the yeast, for dough. There's a starter, and Sydney Banks's experience, his awakening, was kind of the first seed that bloomed of this understanding. And many of us here in this room, in this Zoom room, have been fortunate enough to benefit from that, to change our own lives first, and then the lives of those whoever we're inspired to help. The 3 of you in business, everyone here's, Lynn McWright there has done incredible work in healthcare, especially with nurses, and Ellen Friedman out in the Phoenix area. There's so many. It's just, I think at the last conference there were participants from 38 countries. And it's kind of hard to fathom that from those of us who were there in the beginning, that this could go out so quickly to the whole planet. But it's happening because when you see something works, somebody flew an airplane. Someone flew off the ground. Wow, I want to do that. It really gets the word out when people see change, real change happening. So thank you guys so much for what you offered today. And I appreciate all the questions that you guys gave too, because it enriched what they had to say. So thank you all so much, and hopefully we'll see you next month, and we'll continue this conversation. I really love doing this so much because I don't know, it's less intimidating than being in a classroom for a lot of people, and so people feel really free to ask the difficult questions, and that deepens the speaker's ability to bring out their wisdom. So thank you all for what you contributed.
Thank you, Joe. Happy New Year.
Thank you.
Thank
New
you.
Year to all of you.
Thank you very much.
Nikon, go to bed.
Buddy.
Yeah, I'm going to bed. Thank you.
Good night, Nikon.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you.
Good night. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Good to see
Bye.
everybody. So
Bye, everybody.
good to see everyone. Bye-bye.